Time now for the press review with Erin Ogunkeye. Good to see you, Erin.
Hi, Laurent.
You're starting out with coverage of the far left candidate in France's presidential election, which is less days away, actually.
Yeah, exactly. This upcoming Sunday, Delano. And ahead of that first round of voting, left-leaning paper Libération is profiling Jean-Luc Melenchon, who's on the cover page this morning. Now, the editorial says that his main problem, Delano, is that polling suggests that some 15% of left-wing voters are actually planning, are either undecided or planning on voting for a different leftist candidate that they consider to be less divisive. Now, as Libération points out, that really puts Jean-Luc Melenchon in a tough spot because he has two choices. One is to either tone down his rhetoric, soften his stance on some of the issues, which would be to kind of give up on the firebrand, radical kind of personality that he's built over the past years since he left the Socialist Party in 2008. That's what made him successful. So the paper says that he'll need to somehow convince left-wing voters that his leftist sort of radicalism is a better alternative to A, either not voting at all, or B, choosing one of the far-right candidates.
Speaking of the far-right candidate, Marine Le Pen has been rising in the polls.
Yeah, Delano, the American paper, the New York Times, says that polls for the second round show that Macron could gather 53.5% of the vote, Le Pen closely behind with 46.5%. The American paper pointing out rightly that would represent a major change from the last elections in 2017 when Macron had 66% of the vote and Le Pen just under 34%, so a huge difference 5 years on. Political scientists quoted in the piece warned that because of the level of hatred towards Emmanuel Macron, as well as the high percentage of expected abstention, that's definitely not impossible then that Marine Le Pen could win the elections. It's interesting to add that the Times argues that the other far-right candidate, Éric Zemmour, actually may have helped Marine Le Pen because he was so openly xenophobic. It fit into Marine Le Pen's efforts to kind of soften her image and make herself seem more presidential. Now, Le Figaro this morning, Delano, published a piece on how Macron is indeed already preparing for a second round against Le Pen. Part of his strategy will be indeed to re-demonize her by associating her with people like Éric Zemmour. He'll also try to emphasize that she's been, quote, wrong about everything, to take the words of a Republic on the Move lawmaker quoted in the piece that says that everything she's proposed, from responses to the pandemic to her associations and almost reliance on Vladimir Putin, have been completely wrong.
Turning to the war in Ukraine next, you found a piece about how Kiev may not be winning the communication war outside of Europe.
Yeah, Delano, independent French outlet Mediapart published a piece on how significant portions of the population across the African continent are voicing support for Moscow. It's what some diplomats and international relations experts call the African exception. Now, those experts say that the reasons are, military ties with Russia, reliance on Russia for some products like weapons or even grains. Mediapart says that the reasons are more complex than that, and they've spoken to political parties in several African countries, Benin, the Ivory Coast, and South Africa. And what they gathered from those conversations is that some are arguing that Russia has the right to counter Western expansion. Many see NATO or other Western involvement in African countries, for example, as essentially a modern continuation of Western imperialism. Some of them quoted in the piece say Russia never colonized Africa, so why are they the ones that we should be demonizing and not trusting? It's true that some of them also simply believe Russian propaganda points, which is that these images are falsified. What we're seeing is not true. The West is not covering what's really happening in Russia. They're just looking to demonize Moscow, and that really resonates with a portion of the population in African countries. The last thing I'll say on that, Delano, is that the Mediapart notes that deputies from Marine Le Pen's party, or even former fringe presidential candidate François Asselineau, are invited often to African countries to analyze this conflict, where they repeat some of these same Moscow talking points. Last thing I'll say, Delano, actually, is that this all comes as French officials have accused the Russian-linked paramilitary group Wagner, along with the Malian military, of committing abuses and killing civilians in an anti-terror operation in Mali in late March.
Switching gears next to the United States, with the press there is hailing a new phase for labor movements in the United States.
Yeah, that's because despite myriad attempts to stifle unionization efforts, the Amazon Labor Union won a historic victory in Staten Island, New York on April 1st, becoming the first ever union to successfully organize Amazon employees. Now, the tech website The Verge profiles Christian Smalls, who is the fired worker behind the movement, who is motivated by the poor treatment he said Amazon employees were subjected to. The paper says that his resolve was clearly undermined by Amazon. They say that the company had a dismissive attitude towards himself, Christian Smalls, and fellow organizers, even referring to them as inarticulate thugs. Now, success for the union, according to The Verge, came from camping out near the warehouses, from handing out literature, from answering questions and sharing stories, for example, about how much Amazon was spending on corporate salaries, on labor consultants. This is key for the magazine The Atlantic, which attributes the success of that movement, indeed, to these kind of grassroots efforts, what they describe as the worker-to-worker, bottom-up strategy of organizing, as opposed to the kind of top-down traditional model focused on influence from bigger unions. The Amazon argues that America's unions, now need to help spread that model, train employees on the worker-to-worker union model to other big companies in order to essentially capitalize on this pro-union excitement.
And Aaron, a new report has shed even more light on how Amazon views efforts to improve working conditions.
Yeah, exactly. The Intercept, another independent outlet, published a piece on a Amazon worker chat that would block and flag posts containing keywords related not only to labor unions, but also simply to improving conditions in general. This, according to leaked internal company documents that The Intercept reviewed. Now, that automatic word monitor would block terms like union, pay raise, diversity, grievance, and even the word restrooms that, as we were talking about earlier, is believed to be because of those reports that of Amazon employees having to relieve themselves in plastic bottles to meet punishing quotas. Now, originally, this internal social media program was supposed to be aimed at reducing employee attrition by fostering happiness amongst workers and, of course, productivity. Amazon says that, responding to this article, is saying that this program hasn't been approved yet and might either be significantly changed or not launched at all. So we'll see.
Aaron, thank you very much for that. Aaron Ogunke there with the Press Review, and you can check out other editions of the Press Review on our website, france24.com.